Welcome to the Inside the Sales Playbook show, where on each and every episode, we dive into the actual sales processes, plays, and strategies working for sales teams today. No high-level overview, we get into the actual weeds of what some of the fastest growing and most successful sales teams are doing today to drive revenue and grow their businesses. And we've got two sponsors. Inside the Sales Playbook is sponsored by SalesKit. SalesKit takes the guesswork out of scaling your sales knowledge all on one great platform. No longer do you have to have your sales knowledge spread out on Google Drives and on Dropbox and on various other files and folders and saved locally on your own computer. SalesKit makes it easier than ever for your team to access the sales knowledge that actually works. You can sign up for a free trial at getsaleskit.com. And buy my book, Raise Your Standards, the definitive guide to building seven-figure sales. You can get a copy of this book to help grow your sales, whether you're an entrepreneur, a sales leader, or a sales contributor at getsaleskit.com/book. Let's get into the show. And I'm your host, Mark Evans, and today I'm here with a really awesome dude, Mr. Alex Kaye. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.
Alex is the VP at Rose Garden Consulting. And on top of that, a really good fisherman. I've learned certainly a lot from it. Now, I don't think we're going to get into fishing too much on this episode. But Alex, how about
That'd be a separate podcast.
That whole episode, whole audio book. Alex, how about you give the listeners some context? First, what is Rose Garden Consulting? And how do you help them achieve their mission?
Yeah, absolutely. Rose Garden Consulting is a company started by my partner, Ali, and I'm a partner in it. We basically focus on holistic sales consulting and sales processes, right? So everything from from your compensation plans to your sales process to your hiring, your reps profiles, and how everything tied together, including your tech stack, playbook, so on and so forth, that we really focus on making sure everything's really tied together for a true revenue system. Whereas, a lot of the clients we work with and kind of the problems we've seen in our past and our careers leading up to this consulting point has been seeing those being disconnected. Yeah. And we really spent a lot of time investing in trying to connect those different systems and processes to make sure that everything's working together and actually you get kind of like a multiplication effect, right? That you're not somehow misincentivizing, something that then you're not compensating on. You're compensating something on that's actually hurting your sales process. So making sure all those are aligned. And so we focus on holistic kind of, views and really helping our clients get their revenue in a place where it can scale. And I would say typically we work with teams of 15 to 50 reps. It tends to be the really sweet spot. Whereas, after that, they've probably already kind of got those systems dialed in. Yeah. And we really help kind of get those teams up and running and humming and get them, like I said, that amplification of all those systems working together.
Yeah, I really like that, the amplification. But Alex, let's kind of start with you first. Of all the things you possibly could have done, I know you've got a lot of interest. Man, why the heck did you even choose sales?
Yeah, no, I would say it's a really interesting way I kind of fell into it. It's not that actually interesting. I take that back. It's really not.
Let me be the judgment. I'll let you know after you tell me.
Absolutely. So the kind of the story for me was that I had a marketing degree. I still do. I didn't get rid of it. But I did a marketing internship, and I was very fortunate to have graduated college and had a nice internship in marketing. Graduated in the fall of 2008 when everything was going to hell. Yeah. And so it was this. I took 9 months to find a job at that time, and it was this soul searching. Moment in my life where you're a new grad, you think you've got everything all planned out. You're the master of the world. You're ready to I remember I had a teacher recommend me for grad school, and I told her, I'm sick of being poor. I literally, those were the words that came out of my mouth to my professor was, I'm sick of being poor. And so, I ended up getting a job first as a sales admin. I'd actually, real quick, this story came up with talking to my sister recently. I took a 3-month job with a small startup that folded after 3 months doing SDR work, and it was soul crushing. It was brutal for a company. It was just obviously one of those short-lived ones. I needed a job at the time. And it was just like you're calling down lists, you're trying to talk to people, they don't know who you are, that type of thing. Found my way into sales operations, which is really where I kind of found a lot of traction for me personally and professionally, with my passion of, trying to solve a lot of these systematic problems. And so I kind of translated that into a number of different roles, working more towards more and more ownership, which means smaller and smaller and smaller, which also means higher pressure and pressure
Yeah.
for kind of venture-backed startups, but started in enterprise-level companies and just never quite had the impact in ownership that I wanted to. Right, you're only relegated to a very small piece of the puzzle, and I kept wanting to work closer and closer to the actual data, to the actual teams, with the actual people. And so that translated me into working with smaller companies. And so when ultimately sales leaders turn over and business development leaders turn over, you are forced to work with the team directly. And so you're coaching them on calls. Kind of indirectly became a sales, kind of a sales coach and a sales leader and an enablement leader at that point for a lot of these teams that I was working with. And so that meant doing the call reviews, which meant listening to the calls, which meant coaching, which meant mapping things out, writing more scripts, and kind of developing, taking my, my data and analysis background and marrying that really a lot to the human aspect with the reps, which I think, if I'm going to get on my little mini soapbox for a second, for sales operations people, is they miss a lot. I don't think that you can be a true, real good sales operations or revenue operations person without having experience actually selling, without being, being in the moment and having to have your feet held to the fire like that. I don't think you can properly be the best possible. So not that you can't be a good sales operations person or a rev ops person. I just think that that's what differentiates the really good from just the okay in my mind. And that's so, from there, obviously why sales is because it's a tremendously interesting puzzle to solve. And maybe this goes back to the fly fishing thing, is there's always a new puzzle to solve. There's always a person, there's always a new situation that you need to take all the different factors into account. And it's a really interesting way to not only make a living, but also to keep yourself stimulated. And the rewards are pretty nice. Let's put it that way. Right. Obviously, if you can be good at sales, that, if you like the expensive things, if you like to be money driven, but also if you're just competitive like me, I used to be a competitive runner. And so you just find ways to push yourself and to do that. So hopefully that long story actually is somewhat interesting to some people.
That was good. That was interesting. And I think you have scores of SDRs and account reps, up in the aisles cheering to say, yes, we need sales managers that have actually been in the position of where that individual is, right? They actually had to carry a quota at one time. They had to actually make sales. So yeah, I think that's important. Well, let's pivot to this question. What do you see in your work at Rose Garden Consulting, as well as your background working with a lot of teams? You've obviously seen some great teams, some good teams, and probably some ugly teams. But what I'm really curious about, what do you think right now in Q4 of 2020? What do you think is separating the really good sales-driven organizations and teams from the great sales-driven organizations and teams?
That's a really good question. I would say that the ones that I'm talking to and the ones that I'm hearing about through, different channels and talking to different people in my network, the difference between the good and the great right now are the people who I want to say are the most resilient. But I feel it's the people who are able to block out as many distractions. I've seen a lot of questions come up. I'm part of a few sales communities and stuff like that for revenue leaders. And it's always well, how do I keep my reps focused? How do I can't tell you how many times, probably 3 or 4 times in the last 6 weeks, once a week, almost once a week and a half, there's some leader coming in. And these are people from all over the world and every different revenue organization and size, asking the communities saying, how do I keep my reps focused right now? How do I keep getting them to move forward? And I think that the most successful ones, the people who do respond, who I have talked to and that I've experienced, have been the ones who can keep their reps, help, as a leader, I should say, is help block out that externalities, help keep them focused on the day-to-day, the task to task, and being the person to absorb that and not trying to ignore the external factors of life right now, which is truly hard to block out. You can't ignore them, but the best ones have found ways to do that. Whether that's, people saying, weekly meetings and team bondings, trying to create almost for a sports analogy, is create your own little bubble with your team, create this insulated community, because it's going to be hard for people to understand what you're going through, right? The people you're closest to right here on this team, obviously are people you're probably competing with. But they're also the ones who understand you the best. And I think that that's one of the biggest factors I've seen of good leaders actually helping drive teams to success and staying the most focused and putting their team in the best position to succeed.
Yeah, I really like that. I like the bubble analogy of right. It's kind of controlling like what's in your 3 foot sphere, right? Anything else outside that, you can't really control it. So why bother? And I really, really like that. Thank you for sharing that with us, Alex. Now let's pivot a little bit because I'm getting a lot of requests. I'm hearing from a lot of companies, as probably you are too, all about their training and onboarding, right? The entire training and onboarding for a lot of sales teams has been completely flipped on its head over the past couple of months. And so a lot of organizations right now are looking to obviously reduce ramp time and increase the quality of the training process. So tell me, Alex, what have you seen that you feel has worked really well, either in methods and tactics that you've implemented at other companies or ones that you've experienced firsthand when it comes to onboarding and training? What are some of those best practices you could share with our audience?
Yeah, obviously it's going to be a multi-tiered approach, right? I heard this
Mm.
great term recently, and they call it everboarding, and that's
Oh, I
really
like
something
that.
we've tried to really embrace is this concept of everboarding with new clients of ours, and talking to sales leaders, and obviously anyone else who's involved in the sales training, which would be enablement or whatever, is that everboarding. You're never really done, and so part of that is having a mentor, having a teammate, having not only having a cohort, right? So having people hiring more reps at the same time. So hiring more than rep at a single time is we've seen a great increase in success. I'm not sure if that's something that everybody knows about. I know is
Yeah.
new to a lot of people we've talked about it before. Is when you hire more than one rep at a time, they have each other to lean on. They can coach each other. They're basically like and not only can they help each other, but they're also a measuring stick
Yeah.
for each other,
I really like that.
which really helps. And then I've actually known, we've actually worked with certain clients as well that actually they'll hire 3 reps at a time, and knowing that one of them is going to wash out, and they make it a competition that the highest performing 2 reps get to stay. And they go into it
Wow.
knowing that one person won't make it through the 60 or 90-day period. So they do make it a competition, which is a really interesting way to go about it. And I love kind of seeing how different people have tried to solve this ramp problem, right? Or this ramp challenge. Beyond that, so obviously having a mentor, obviously having some sort of buddy system, obviously having a good robust training program. And in terms of what I've seen work the best, honestly, and not to be too much of a sales operations guy, but tech.
Mm.
You can't be on the phone all day. You can't be on Zoom all day with someone walking you through the same way you used to be able to sit at someone's desk
Yeah.
and talk them through it. We have to find better tech solutions that integrate into the day to day, and that's been one of the best things I've seen work. Specifically, I just ran across a great new way to help create institutional knowledge. There's a company called, sorry, I'm not trying to rep them. I just saw it was a great solution called Spec It, and it keeps Salesforce as kind of your main hub. But it also allows you to create it basically integrates your sales playbook and any sort of reference material into your Salesforce, like in one screen, which is a really interesting way to go about it, which I really liked. So for bigger companies who, if you're spread out a lot, I thought it was a great solution for that. Whereas smaller companies, obviously you're going to have to find something probably like more like, an LMS type system
Yeah.
for your reps. So I think that training, that initial, obviously hiring in cohorts is really interesting. Obviously there's like competition aspect, making sure they have some sort of mentor, and then this concept of make sure that there's no offboarding, right? Like
Mm.
obviously you're ramping into a full quota and everything like that, but at the same time you're probably never done if you're going to be really successful.
Yeah, I really like that. Never offboarding and always be everboarding. I really, really dig that.
Everboarding.
What's a first step? Someone that's listening to this says,
Hashtag
"Oh wow, that
everboarding,
sounds
right?
yeah." Hashtag everboarding. Let's say that I'm listening to this and I'm like, "Wow, this is great. I want to start everboarding." What's a good first step that someone could take by the end of this week or by mid next week to already start and to go from this? Hey, we have a sales boot camp. It's 4 weeks and it starts here and it ends here. To we have this ever evolving, everboarding process.
Yeah, I would definitely say that's going to have to be something that's most likely driven by a sales leader and a committee, right? Because you're going to need a sales leader to help drive this and help kind of figure out, well, what's going well, what's not, as well as the top. I would say that maybe not always the top performing rep, because sometimes they can be lone wolves, right? That profile doesn't always lend itself to like being self-aware and wanting to share secrets,
Mm-hmm.
what's working, what's not. But you're going to have a rep on the ground who's able to represent the experience of the rep day to day to help kind of create this ever evolving. What are we missing, right? So if you always have every 2 weeks having this, what are we doing well? What's not working? I know that when I was in sales operations, we would sit down between marketing. We'd have our marketing operations manager, our business development manager, me as a sales operations manager, and then our sales leader all sit down together and say, let's look at the data. What are we hearing on conversations? What's going well and what's not? Then how do we create a training plan around that? So that's how we kind of view Everboarding, have in the past at least, is creating this small little committee and meeting every 2 weeks or so to figuring out, is it working? Is it not working? What can we do to make it better? And then obviously things like product training, competitor training, things for sales enablement and product are always going to be involved in that, as it ever should be, right? Because there's always going to be enhancements, there's always going to be new launches, but making sure there's an opportunity to do that, as well as the last one that I forgot to mention was like the client services. Hearing what your client, if anyone's managing the clients, what are the problems they're continuing to face? Who are the people you had really good conversations with, and what are their experience like now? Because a lot of times those people, I have to say that those people tend to have the greatest insights in my experience of how best to sell. I can't tell you how many times we went from a sales meeting where we had a client success person, an account manager, whatever you want to call them, come in and talk to the team. And then we take that immediately and put that into a playbook, put that into a script, put that into, hey, let's all test this today. And just the immediate questions. If we can turn that into a question to ask, people light up on the other end, right? And we have a more deeply engaged client on the other end of that phone call. And so I definitely love to work those people into a monthly rotation in terms of like training and making sure that we're accommodating everything that they're seeing in terms of our clients.
That's awesome. There's a lot of really good tactical stuff in this. I just want to make sure everybody caught it. So the first one is going back and really being on like a 2-week cycle, it sounds like. All right, what's working, what's not working, and then what can we do to make it better? I really like kind of asking those 3 questions. What's working, what's not working, then what can we do to make it better? Then in the same process, and taking all those learnings, right, and implementing, I would assume you then implement training programs.
Correct.
One-on-ones, stuff like that, team training sessions. That's awesome. And then it sounds like the second kind of track that you're on, or the rotation, is every single month having someone from a client-facing role, the client services side of the team, really come and talk about what they're hearing from the front lines from the client.
Exactly. And the thing I do want to advocate for a lot is the balance between qualitative and quantitative. I think that listening to the reps, and not just because there isn't always data to back something up, doesn't mean we should ignore it. And I think that in this data crazy world, and as someone who came from a data background, I think the big, and this goes that empathy or that experience of actually selling, is just because you're not measuring something does not make it any less real, right? Just because you're seeing, there's a lot of things that go into conversion percentages. There's a lot of things that go into closing percentages, so on and so forth, that listen to the reps, make sure you have a representative on there or someone who's listening to the calls, and who can really speak to that qualitative aspect, not just whatever you're measuring, because those are both really important, and you'll get some great insights. So I think one of the big things that we preach a lot is that balance between the two. That everyone's data crazy these days, and obviously, like you work in SaaS, everything's SaaS is a data business, but people still run it. And we are, people matter, and that making sure we're listening to the people, that even if we're not measuring it, it still is important to balance and weight.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think this is a good point. Let's segment and pivot over into the sales playbook. Obviously, this is the Inside the Sales Playbook show, so we got to talk about what's in the sales playbook. First of all, the companies that you're either consulting for, or if someone comes on board at Rose Garden Consulting, do they get a sales playbook? And if so, what's one of the more successful plays or sections of that playbook?
That's a good question. No, there's a great phrase I learned a long time ago, and that is prescription without diagnosis is malpractice.
I like that.
And so we try to do our best, not only enact that and preach that with our clients, but so not everyone gets a playbook. If it's right, they do. Absolutely. I would say that tends to be one of the problems that most people struggle with. So I would say that 80% of our clients do. I would say that, the question was, what was one of the best ones?
Yeah. And then what's one of your favorite plays, either one that's really successful or one that like just about every business could really benefit from?
Yeah, that's a good one. I would say that lately, the most beneficial one lately, I would say, realizing let's pivot and not just look at historics, right? Because everything's changing right now, is less is more. And so we've been coaching, kind of the plays that we've been really coaching a lot of reps on is, less is more, spend more time. I would say that there's probably about 25% of our clients that we're working with right now, we're actually working to pivot their teams away from things like sales automation tools, right? Like things like automated emails, just because we're seeing such good engagement rates on like slow it down and then figure out how to ramp it, where one-to-one emails, with just simple tailoring and just writing a simple one-to-one email is getting great response rates because people are focusing on email. It does seem the more personal we can make it right now, the more of a person you can seem like. So this things like, obviously in-person mailers, sorry, not in-person mailers, but physical mailings are working really well.
Yeah.
Like really short one-to-one emails. I know that's not like if you're working 100 different leads, that's going to be really tough.
It's going to be tough. Yeah.
We've actually seen greater engagement by scaling down the amount of leads, getting more responses because we're doing things like including photos, including videos, making one, like the things like the Vidyards of the world.
Yeah.
Obviously, social selling in a very, I don't want to say authentic way because that feels so trite. But doing less is actually producing more work, more results for us right now, for about 25% of our clients. There's other clients who really are relying on that. There's this kind of like this, Grant Cardone, just 10x your pipeline, just shove 10 more times in there and you'll find the people who are looking for you. And you know what? There is a certain amount of, that's one tactic that you can take, is just find the low-hanging fruit, find the people who are looking for you. I think that we tend to advocate more for laying the foundation early on and being more personal is the best way to do that, because if you believe what you do is really valuable and important, and it's been the right strategy for a lot of our clients, is lay that foundation, lay that groundwork, and they'll come back to you. They'll remember that you didn't just spam them and move on when they weren't ready. They'll know that you gave them, you tried to make a meaningful impression as a human, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges we see is people relying too much on automation and technology, not knowing that there's another person on the other end of it that's pushing the button, right?
Yeah.
How can you be more of a human? So that's kind of the play that's working the best for us right now, is slowing down a little bit and doing a little bit more and spending more time, since we have more time. If we're not commuting, we don't have all these other things going on. If we're not in the offices, is spending that time actually doing one-to-one type engagements.
I really like that. I think that's really smart. I think people get in trouble when they just take like one prescription, to kind of use your words before, right? And let's go with 10 times. Well, all you got to do is 10 times. Well, maybe, but maybe that doesn't work necessarily for your business, right? That may work if you're selling a $50 widget or product, but if you're selling a $50 or $75 or $100,000 product, that may not work, right? You may not just be able to all of a sudden go and get 10,000 different leads, right, that you can just shove into your pipeline. It's not like an Apple. It's not just like, this easy formula that you can do. So I really like that. And I think, personal one-to-one is definitely going to win, because we've seen really good examples of that too. And there's some great companies that are really having success with it. All right. That's awesome.
I'm curious, what would you say to that?
Yeah, so I really agree with that as well, the personality and going one-to-one with it. And I think right now, too, is a really good time for reps to, I don't know, one of the plays that I'm prescribing to a lot of companies is, this is the time now to get your stuff right. Like you put off getting your systems, you put off, having any sort of template, you've put off trying to systematize your sales in any sort of process. So my advice to a lot of founders right now is, all right, we got to work at like just getting that out of your brain, right? And now is the time to shift from founder-led sales to actually, what is this like team approach, or what is this more scalable approach? Because I saw so many founders and entrepreneurs put it off, well, I'm going to do it in 2020. Well, I'll do it in the second quarter of 2020. And then their business like is faced with all of this challenge, and now they're behind the 8 ball. So that's really my beat and message to entrepreneurs and founders right now.
Is do the foundational work when you have the opportunity. And you're right, because that's a great point, is because a lot of people, they grow so fast. They have so much opportunity. You don't have that moment in time to slow down to do it. Right. Yeah. And you're saying, well, recognize this as the moment in time where maybe things have slowed down a bit. If if that it will come back and you trust that it will, now is the time to invest in that, and don't wait, because again, you're going to get really busy again. And now is the time to invest in it. It makes a lot of sense, and I definitely agree. I think that we're we're dealing with a lot of people right now who are having the exact opposite problem. They're like, this is our moment.
Yeah,
we're getting inbound leads and conversations with people like, this is our moment. Our business would have taken 5 years to scale to get this kind of opportunity, and it exploded overnight. How do we do this? We're not even close to prepared. Which is the other side of it, right? So obviously that less is more might not work for them, But at the same time, they have a completely different strategy. Like, how do you maximize share of wallet? How do you position yourself as a partner, a long-term partner? And those are completely different strategies that they really need to work on. But I definitely agree with what you're saying, that if you happen to be in that where you took a small hit, you see a small downturn, now's the time to build the foundation.
I think even companies that are experiencing some massive growth right now, you got to build the foundation as well, because if you don't do that, your business is leveraged up against tricky foundations, right? Or rickety foundations, I will say. And so you can continue to stack and stack and stack and stack. And maybe this, interesting time in the market and this interesting time in the economy is going to your benefit. But if that changes, or if that even increases, well, then your system is going to be maxed out. And that's what I don't want to see. That's always the most frustrating part in working with companies, or the most disappointing part, I should say, is when they have a great product, they have great people, they have great leadership, but they never built a foundation, because they always put it off as, well, we'll do it again, or we'll do it later, or we'll do it next time. And then either their business goes one of two ways, right? They blow up and they can't contain that growth, so they can't capitalize and maximize that amazing time where businesses, seems like it happens in a quarter, right? You got this time where you can really go, or their business takes a different turn, right? And goes to the other side where they've really got to rebound, but they don't have those systems in place to even know what's wrong, what's broken, what's fixed, because they don't even have their math formula figured out. So that's what I think. I think it applies to both, but it's awesome.
How would you know? Like, I'm curious. I was asked this question once, and I thought it was a great question to ask. And I'm curious what you would say is, if you were to walk into a business, a sales team right now, what are the two or three things you would look for? Maybe five. I don't know, 1 to 5 things you would look for to know if if that team is going to be successful, if they're going to be able to scale in the way that they'd like to, if they had a foundation to build upon.
Yeah. Well, I think first it would be, all right, if we brought in 10 new sales reps, like tomorrow or next week, could your team handle it? Like, could you handle it, right? If we all of a sudden, and I think this is a question that a lot of venture firms, ask, and venture capitalists ask them, all right, hey, if we were to give you, $100 million tomorrow, how would you spend it, right? How would you spend this? And so that's the question I like to ask a lot of companies. Hey, if we bring in 10 people next week, what are they going to do, right? And if your answer is like, well, I don't really know. No, you need to know, like, all right, how would they ramp? What's the training schedule? If we start, when should we anticipate them starting to close deals, right? And so having that mapped out, I think, is the first thing. And usually you can tell kind of what is the answer. If it's a lot of hemming and hawing of like, well, I don't really know what's going on, then you obviously know you got to dive deeper into that. But if they're like, oh, well, this is the schedule, this is how we ramp, this is how we know when people will be successful, that's where I think the gold is.
No, I think it's a great point. And I think that anyone who does listen to this, hopefully that is a question to ask yourself, right? If you're trying to ramp, if you feel like that's a great litmus test, right? Does that make sense for you? Do you have that? Do you have that process or did you hem and haw? Would you struggle to answer that question in that way? Because to your point, that's exactly right. When I answered that question, I don't think it's changed much. It's, the two primary things that I would look for, then there's a third, but the two things are rep churn and client churn. You're never going to scale if you can't properly acquire the right talent, train them properly, ramp them properly, and have them stick around. Because you'll never, I don't think I've ever seen a company able to scale sales if they can't keep reps, if they don't have a process and a system to find the right talent, to be able to identify the talent, train them right, get them onto ramp, and then retain them, right? So, because there's any number of different failure points in there. The last one probably being culture, in that, and then the second one is obviously client churn, right? Your customers is that basically if you don't renew, you don't have a scalable model. Most companies aren't. You may get lucky, and you may have a kind of transactional type model that does sustain. But generally speaking, those are the two things that I see that I'm going to ask about, and I can know within 20 minutes, if this company has an opportunity to scale, or if you really do have systematic problems. And the third thing that I would say that I've kind of recently, the stool, the little tripod to be able to stand on to scale,
the
right?
You think stool, about,
exactly. That, would be that the classic product market fit. Do you actually offer something people want in a way that they know how to consume and that is beneficial to them? But obviously, those are kind of like the three different areas that we look at, and I've seen that have kind of determined that. And I definitely, encourage anyone listening, within earshot to think about those things if you're in business, if you're trying to scale your sales team or your revenue efforts or your business even. those are, I feel like, in my very humble opinion, those are the things that matter the most. And I haven't seen a team be successful without those.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's excellent. There's a lot of gold in this conversation. I know people are going to be rewinding and wanting to hear that over again. That was really, really good. Well, let's pivot now until I want to close with the final 5. Alex, these are 5 quick fire questions. I'll ask them. You answer them. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
All right, let's dive in. Favorite sales related movie?
I'm going to have to go Wolf of Wall Street. I know it's lame, but it's just too fun and too weird not to. I'm a weird fella, like deep down, so I like the weird and the quirkiness in that movie. So yeah.
We'll go with it. What's your favorite sales book?
Favorite sales book. It's a tangential sales book, but it has to do with it's, I don't know if you and I have talked about it separately, but it's a book called Alchemy by Rory Sutherland. It's not like traditional sales, but it's about marketing and just about how people make decisions. And I've recommended it as far as I can, and I will recommend it again. It's called Alchemy. And it's basically about how people actually make decisions, and it's phenomenal. I can't recommend it enough.
All right, I'll have to check that one out. What do you know now that you wish you would have known when you first got into sales?
Yeah, I would say that it's not an art and it's not a science. It's a whole lot of practicing skills. And failing in live situations. The analogy I've kind of come up with recently that we're putting in this new book we're writing is that it's kind of like being a chef, right? Science and chemistry plays a role in being a chef, but being a good chef is not anything. You can read a book, you can read recipes, but that does not make a good chef. And that's where the art and the performance and the experience comes in. What kind of outcome, what kind of experience do you provide for your clients? That is where the art comes in, right? Where you still have to understand the chemistry of temperatures and, reactions and stuff like that to be a good cook. And if you don't, you're going to fail. And if you don't do the other side, it's going to be an uninspired eating experience. So that's kind of like that balance. So it's that, great reps can be trained, they can be made, but you really have to embrace both sides of it.
Like it. Not an art, not a science. All right. Best purchase of 2020 under $100.
Oh, best purchase of 2020 of under $100. That's a great question. Let's see here. I don't know if people can hear this or see this. I am a ginger. I am a fair skinned human being. And it might be lame, but I wear like the big straw hats. I have this wonderful straw hat I get to wear in the summer where it keeps like, hey, it's nice not to be sunburned.
You need that. Yeah. You don't want to be pink all year.
I remember as a kid for a long time, I really rebelled wearing sunscreen. Then I realized like it's way worth it. Just embrace the fact that you're a ginger. You didn't choose this, so just put it on and deal with it. So investing in a good sun hat and sunscreen for a ginger is a good thing. Yeah,
that the sun life didn't choose you. All right, and your favorite social media follow of 2020?
Yeah, and this might be a little bit too telling of a story, but it's called the Brainy Business, and it's a podcast and social media account by a behavioral economist who, again, behavioral economics is kind of the core principles that's in Alchemy. And it's about kind of how people actually make decisions in real life. And this woman started, her name eludes me right now, but she did a great podcast about it and kind of talks about how you can apply behavioral economics principles in business specifically.
Love it. I'll have to check that out.
It's been my new binge-worthy podcast. And
the Brainy Business Podcast. Okay, that sounds great. And where, Alex, if our listeners want to connect with you, where is the best place for them to do so? Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn is pretty much the only social media I'm active on. Okay. I think the others are kind of toxic. So LinkedIn, and obviously our website. So me personally, LinkedIn at Alex TK is the domain I guess I got, but Alex Kaye at Rose Garden Consulting, then our Rose Garden Consulting account as well. So those are the best places to find us. All right. Well, I'll make sure to link those in the show notes. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Alex Kaye with Rose Garden Consulting. Alex, thanks so much for taking us inside the sales playbook. Appreciate you, Mark.